Good.
Okay. Three names just that our learning should go for Zion ben Leah Melka, Michal ben Nechama, and Ariela Basrus. All are people who are connected to this share. They should have a refuah shlema, please God. So today we are learning Ayin Vav, which is 76. It's the first one of the three kapitlach of today's for today's Tehillim. So this kapitel of Tehillim is I don't know if you can call it like a prototype. It's talking about the main opinion is that it's talking about the time right before Mashiach comes, what goes on in the world, and how when we finish fighting the war against Gog and Magog, which is the final war before Mashiach comes, the glory of Hashem will be unshrouded, if we can call it, because right now in Galus we don't see Hashem's glory all the time, but please God, when Mashiach comes, we will see Hashem's glory, and that's how the order that this kapitel of Tehillim goes. The way it works is that by most opinions, this is actually the story of the war of Chizkiyahu, King Chizkiyahu, and his war against King Sanherib. And exactly what happened there will happen at the time of Mashiach with the war of Gog and Magog. So just to understand a little bit, King Chizkiyahu, he was the king over what we call Malchus Yehuda. So you remember that that all of Israel is divided into two parts: the 10 tribes who went off and got lost. Okay, eventually the 10 tribes, and then the 2 tribes, Yehuda and Binyamin, who were called Malchus Yehuda, and Chizkiyahu was the king of Malchus Yehuda. Now, Chizkiyahu was a very, very, very great man, right? Chizkiyahu means that his strength comes from Hashem. He was a tzaddik of the highest degree. He saw the most incredible miracles, and we could probably spend a whole shir just talking about the miracles that Chizkiyahu experienced himself. And there was one problem. And what is the problem? Explains in Gemara that although Chizkiyahu had miracle after miracle after miracle, he never said thank you to Hashem. Chizkiyahu was very busy studying Torah, and he felt that if he's studying Torah and doing mitzvahs all the time, that's enough. He doesn't have to stop and say thank you. Isn't it obvious if I'm studying Torah, I'm doing what Hashem wants, that is gratitude? And the Torah says no, gratitude is not just the studying of Torah, that's just one arm of it, but the actual acknowledgement of what someone has done good for us, and the actual verbalizing of thank you, that itself is really like so important. And in fact, the Gemara tells that Hashem intended for Chizkiyahu to be Mashiach, and he was great enough to be Mashiach. And the angels in heaven, the angels of din, of justice, said to Hashem, how can you make Chizkiyahu into Mashiach? Chizkiyahu saw miracle after miracle after miracle, and he never stopped and said thank you. On the other hand, his ancestor David, a few generations back, he said thank you to Hashem over and over and over again for all the good things that you did to him. And even when he was in trouble, he said thank you to Hashem. And you didn't make him Mashiach, you're going to make Chizkiyahu Mashiach? Doesn't make sense. And Hashem agreed with him, and he said, yeah, doesn't make sense. And he abandoned the plan that Chizkiyahu should be Mashiach. In this kapitel of Tehillim, which is composed by Asaf, Asaf is what he's doing over here is that he is saying thank you, if we could call it that, on behalf of Chizkiyahu. He's explaining the miracles that happened to Chizkiyahu, and he is showing gratitude with it. And that's why it begins, the kapitel begins, Lam Natseach. We said it to the chief musician. Whenever a kapitel begins with the words Lam Natseach, then this is one of the chapters which is said in the Beis HaMikdash and sung in the Beis HaMikdash. So he's saying this kapitel that I'm going to, that I'm composing now is going to be one of those kapitla that are said over and over and over in the Beis HaMikdash. And how should you do it? Bin ginais, which means with lots of different musical instruments, with like real rejoicing, right? This is a kapitel of Tehillim that's going to show gratitude, okay? That you're going to show Hashem how thankful we are that that he made those miracles for Chizkiyahu. And this was Mizmor LaAsaf Shir. It was a song which came to Asaf. Interesting also, one of the big miracles that happened is that Sanherib and his men made this terrible big siege around Jerusalem with thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of soldiers, and it looked like by logic there was no possible way that Chizkiyahu's army could win over them. And the reason that Chizkiyahu's army managed to win over them was absolutely miraculous, just simply because of the miracles that Hashem made. So one of the things that Sanherib and his men did is that they walked around Jerusalem and they hurled insults at Hashem. They were trying to make the people in Jerusalem like really upset and nervous and whatever. So one of the ways that they were making them nervous was by walking around Jerusalem and saying blasphemous things about Hashem. And what did Hashem do? In their sleep, they started to hear the songs, Mizmor LaAsaf Shir. They started to hear the songs of the angels in heaven. And this was far too holy for them. And because holiness that's too holy for our bodies to take kills. And so they were hearing these songs and they died in their sleep. Thousands and thousands of Sanherib's men died in their sleep. The next morning when Sanherib walked around his army camp, thousands, according to some opinions, 185,000 men had died in their sleep. So continues and says, Noida Yehuda Elokim, Hashem is known in Yehuda, but Yisrael Gadol Shemai, and in Israel his name is very great. So the chat says that Mish is trying to get in. I think that a lot of people have load shedding because a lot of people are messaging to say that they can't get in. I don't know why. I think it must be the electricity or the MTN or whatever. So Chizkiyahu didn't believe that you could win a war by just having military strength. So one of the laws that he made was that every person in Malchus Yehuda, in his kingdom, had to study Torah and the intricate details of Torah. So at the time of Chizkiyahu, they weren't just a few scholars. It says men, women, and children were all well-versed. They were brilliant. They knew the halachas, they knew Torah, they knew different, they were very, very, very learned. He believed that was the only way to fight a war and to be able to win the war. So this is what Asaf means over here when he says, Noida Yehuda Elokim. In the kingdom of Yehuda, Hashem is known. Everybody knows him. Now, what about Yisrael, the other 10 tribes? So it says the greatness of Hashem and the miracles that he performed, even those 10 tribes who were lost had heard about it wherever they were. They heard about the greatness of what Hashem had done. And it says this spark of hearing about the greatness of Hashem carries on forever and ever, for thousands of years. So we still often get like this, hey, Hashem did that amazing thing, or I heard about this miracle, or I feel this miracle. I say, where does that come from? It starts already from the time of Chizkiyahu, but Yisrael Gadol Shemai, that among Jews, even if they don't even know that they're Jews, they're 10 lost tribes of Israel, one of the things that they have in them, the pintala, the little spark of understanding or hearing about Gadol Shemai, the greatness of Hashem, and attaching ourselves to Hashem's greatness. The next pasuk, Gimel, Vayhi v'shalom sukkah, and Shalom is his sanctuary, Uman Isai b'Tzion, and his home is in Tzion. So simplest way of understanding this, Vayhi v'shalom sukkah, and Shalom is his sanctuary. So we know that when the world was created, Hashem decided that the city of Yerushalayim would be the holiest place on earth. Okay, so Shalem was the original name for Yerushalayim, and if you remember, if you've ever studied the beginning of Sefer Bereshis, and it speaks about Melchizedek Melech Shalem, Melchizedek who was the king of Shalem, and over there all the commentaries say that Shalem is Yerushalayim. How did it get the name Yerushalayim? After the Akedah, after Abraham agreed to sacrifice his son Yitzchak, at the end of the whole thing, he says, I'm going to call this place Yira Hashem, that Hashem, sorry, the other way around, Hashem Yira, that Hashem will see. And every time Hashem looks at Yerushalayim, so to speak, he remembers and he sees the merits of our forefathers, and he thinks about the good things that they did. So he looks at Yerushalayim and he says, hey, Abraham was prepared to sacrifice his son for me. Hey, Yitzchak was prepared to be a sacrifice for me. So Abraham said, Hashem Yireh. This is the place where Hashem will look and he will see the merits of that should come to the Yidden. And then the Gemara explains that Hashem took the two names, the name Yireh, Hashem Yireh, and the name of Shalem, and he put them together, Yerushalayim, right? So that's how it got its name, Yerushalayim. So that's a simple understanding of Vayehi v'Shalem Sukkah, that his home, his sukkah, will be in Yerushalayim. The word Shalem also means complete. And Chazal tell us that there are three mitzvahs that a person can do with their complete body. So what are those three mitzvahs? Someone who goes to mikvah. When you go into the mikvah, your whole body has to be in order for it to be a kosher immersion. So you are shalem, you are completely, your whole body is completely involved in the mitzvah. Another mitzvah that we do with our whole bodies is eating in a sukkah. Right, you go into the sukkah and your whole body from head to toe, and even your clothes and your shoes are all with you doing the mitzvah. You are shalem, you are complete in doing the mitzvah. And the third mitzvah that you can do with your whole self, which is again is someone who lives in Eretz Israel. Then a person is in Israel, they are shalem, they are complete. Everything about them is busy doing a mitzvah. Even their house is doing a mitzvah, right? Everything about what they're doing is a mitzvah. So it says when we do any of those three mitzvahs, then we are considered shalem, we are considered complete. Vayhi v'shalem. If a person wants to be shalem, this is what they must do. They must do these three mitzvahs. Sukkah, all the Mephoshim agree that this is speaking not about an ordinary sanctuary, but it's talking about the Beis HaMikdash. And so the pasuk says, Vayhi v'shalem Sukkah, that his Beis HaMikdash is there in Yerushalayim and is there to help us to be complete. And what does it mean? Umanoisei b'Tzion, and his home is in Tzion. So the Medrash tells us that when Sanherib was surrounding Yerushalayim, then Chizkiyahu went together with the Navi of the time, Yeshayahu, and they sat together in the Beis HaMikdash and they started davening. Instead of going out to fight a war, they just sat in the Beis HaMikdash and they davened and they davened and they davened, and all of a sudden sparks of fire started appearing in Sanherib's camp, and thousands of Sanherib's men were just killed. Okay, they were just consumed by fire. So this is one of the miracles that happened of Chizkiyahu defeating Sanherib's army, and there everybody saw that in Tzion, coming out of the Beis HaMikdash, was Hashem's greatness. Shama Shiba Rishpe Keshes, there Hashem shattered bows and arrows, Magain, shields, the Cherev and swords, Umilchama and wars. Selah forever. So again, at a simple level, it's over there, coming out of Yerushalayim, coming out of the Beis HaMikdash most specifically, that Sanherib, who was this big army, strong army that says about Sanherib that he could shoot an arrow from one side of the world to the other, and no one could stop it. It just pierced through everything from one side of the other. And when he shot at Yerushalayim, the gates of Yerushalayim stopped the arrows. Okay, so this is the miracles. Chizkiyahu also gave his army ammunition. He gave them shields and weapons and whatever, because he said if you do come face to face with Sanherib's soldiers, you need to be prepared. You need to have what to fight with. And he also made plans for how they would fight if they had to fight. And another thing that Chizkiyahu did is he sent gifts to Sanherib, and he said, yeah, we're going to give you from the best things of Yerushalayim, and you go home. Okay, leave us alone. And the Medrash tells how Sanherib mocked him. So what do you think? Your gifts are going to do anything for me. I'm going to wipe you out, and then I'm going to have everything of yours. So your gifts do nothing for me. Where did Chizkiyahu get this plan to daven, to give gifts, and to get himself ready to fight? So he learned this from Yaakov. When Yaakov faced Esav the first time, he did this 3-point plan. He sent Esav gifts. He made a plan with his men. He split them in half and planned to ambush Esav. And he turned to Hashem and he davened. He said, "Please, Hashem, help us." So Chizkiyahu got this same plan, that when he faced Sanherib, he did these 3 acts of preparation. And obviously the lesson for us is that as we face Gog and Magog, as we come into the end of Galus, we also have to think of these 3 things. So the first thing we have to think of is davening. That's the most important thing. When we're afraid of the outside world, when we're afraid of anti-Semitism, when we're afraid of the Goyim, our first point is turn to Hashem and daven. Daven with all your heart. The second thing is gifts, right? So gifts are twofold. The one thing is that we should be looking to, in certain circumstances, obviously with proper direction, to make peace treaties and try and come to some kind of compromise or gifts with the goyim around us. And more than that, gifts means talking to Hashem, saying to Hashem, I will do this, I'll study this, I'll learn that. And these are gifts that we give to Hashem that he should look after us. And then, of course, there's preparation for war. We have to know how to face the goyim, what things that we have to do and how to fight. In other words, to have weapons. In Chassidus, it says, what is going to be the use of weapons at the end of time, like the fight with Gog and Magog just before Mashiach comes? Because we know that weapons it says at the time of Mashiach, nation will not fight against nation, right? They're going to beat their swords into plowshares. So what is the point of weapons? Like, how's that going to help us? And Chassidus explains that each of these weapons is actually talking about something different. So what does it mean in the pasuk when it says keshes, that's arrows, magain, shields, cherev, swords, and milchama is fighting? So it's talking about a different kind of weapon, different kind of plans. So firstly, says the Rebbe, it's talking about davening. Davening takes 2 forms. There is davening that is just impulsive. You're walking down the street and you want Hashem's help, and without thinking, without any kind of formality, you turn to Hashem and you ask him for help. That is one kind of davening. There's another kind of davening, which is formal prayer. There's a seder, and it's got words written in it, and there's specific times that we say specific prayers. That's a more formal davening, and says and says, the Rebbe explains that this is the two different kinds of behaviors. So you know that when we have God forbid, if we have a sword and we want to get rid of somebody, it's just an impulsive act. The person takes their knife, their sword, whatever, and they can harm someone else very quickly without big preparation. They just take their knife and they can harm someone. An arrow, on the other hand, you have to think about it. You have to have the right bow. You have to know what you're doing. You have to walk backwards a little bit. You have to set it up. And all of that is to enable you to shoot your arrow. So says the Rebbe explains that this is two kinds of davening. One kind of davening is the Chereb, it's like the sword, it's impulsive and quick. And there's the other kind of davening, which is like the keshes, like the arrow, that if we prepare and we use it correctly, this formal tefillah, it can shoot like an arrow can shoot. What is Magain, the shields that we have? So it says all the good things that we do, all our merits, that is Magain, it's our shields. And what is milchama? What is the war? This is our daily fight with the Yetzer Hara. That we've got to fight the Yetzer Hara, and that is the war that we have, which is going to help us to overcome Gog and Magog. Continues the capital Tilim Pasuk Hey says Na'ar Ata Adir Mahararei Tarif. Hashem, you are so amazingly great, so light, from much stronger than the highest of all your enemies. And I'm just going to carry on just because of time. I'm looking at Eshtailalu Abirei Leiv. Those who were rebellious of heart have been destroyed. Namu shnasam, their sleep has come over them. V'leimatzu kol anshe chayil yadehem, and all the men of war couldn't find their strength. So this is what happened to Sanherib's men, and it says will happen again at the time of Gog and Magog, that at the end, when they had to fight, so they're all very clever, they've all been trained. You have the spies, and you have people who, like the defense minister, and you have people who know how to use this kind of aeroplane and that kind of war thing and whatever. And at the end of the time of when it came to fighting, Eshtalalu Abirei Leiv, all those people who had been training and were so clever and had been everything of theirs was lost. They had no idea what to do. They became, in the words of Asaf, they became stupid. They lost their brilliance when they stood up to fight Chizkiyahu's men. And it says that at the time of Gog and Magog, it's one of the things that we will see, that very well-trained enemies will suddenly seem so stupid. And it says, and I leave you to come draw your own conclusion, that leaders and heads of armies and all that will do things that lay people will look at and say, is that clever? Okay, what were they thinking when they did it? What were they thinking when they said that? How did they imagine that was going to work, right? So this is Eshtailalu Abirei Leiv that Hashem says at the time of Gog and Magog. We will already see it starting now in the Ikvas the Mashiach, that the leaders become stupid, and when it says and that they can't even find their own hands. The Medrash tells us, or sorry, not the Medrash, says in Shir Hashirim that there were two kings, non-Jewish kings, King Paro and King Tarbeka. So Paro from Mitzrayim and King Tarbeka, who was from Ethiopia. And they decided that they were going to stick up for Chizkiyahu, but they were going to do this very cleverly. They would join Sanherib's army, be there on the inside, and they would really be fighting for Chizkiyahu. And Sanherib heard about this, and so he took these two kings and their men, and he tied them up, their hands and feet. And he was planning to make a spectacle out of them. In the meantime, so many of Sanherib's men died during the night. And just they were there, left alive and tied up. They were able to be saved, run away, run home back to Egypt and back to Ethiopia, and tell everybody about the miracles that happened. So this is that the Laimatsu for Anshe Chayil, these Anshe Chayil, these great warriors couldn't find their hands and feet, but they're the ones who were able to go and tell about the greatness of what the miracles of what Hashem had made. Migarascha Elekei Yaakov Nirdam Varecha Vasus, O God of Yaakov, your punishment made the horse riders and the horses Nirdam. Most of the translations put stunned, but actually Nirdam translates literally as sleep, because so many of Sanherib's men died in their sleep. Ata Neira, Ata, you are awesome, Hashem. Who can stand in front of you, Hashem, when you are angry? And this is a promise that no nation will be able to wipe out the Yidden, because when Hashem gets cross, they cannot achieve it. So year after year, century after century, decade after decade, we've seen nations that seem so strong and try and wipe out the Yidden. But Atanaira, Hashem, you are awesome. You don't allow it. You don't allow it to happen. Mishamayim hishmata, from the heavens, hishmata din, you made your judgment be heard. Eretz Yara, the earth was afraid, Veshakata, and it got quiet again. So this is telling us in the big picture that at the time of the downfall of Gog and Magog and Mashiach coming, everyone will hear about it. And I remember when we were little and our teachers told us that when Mashiach comes, everyone will hear about it, and we always wondered how it's possible. And now every single year we see like more technology, and I don't think any of us say, how's it possible for everybody to hear? We all know that it's absolutely possible for everybody to hear. I remember when I was in school, we always used to say, it will be the headlines on the newspaper. And then things got more forward, communication got more forward, and we said, oh, it will be the signs on the highways. And then we said, no, it will be telephones, and it will be, and now we know that in very short time, in less than seconds, news can travel all over, everywhere over the world. And this is a promise from heaven. Your judgment, the fall of Gog and Magog, will be heard. The land will be awed, and it will be quiet. It says that after a big miracle, there's always silence, there's always quiet. And we have this from the time of Matan Torah. One of the things that it says about when Hashem gave the Torah is that the whole world was quiet. Beautiful poem that's read on Shavuos, where it says, even the angels stopped their singing, the bells on the cows stopped ringing. The world got very, very quiet. Whenever there is a huge miracle, something that's too big to explain with words, then the appropriate response is to be quiet. So it says that when Mashiach comes, the first response will be silence. Okay, Eretz, the land will get scared, will be awed, so to speak, v'shakat, and it will be quiet. The commentaries tell us this is also alluding to the time of Hashem created the world, and he said to the world, you will only exist if the Yidden accept the Torah. So when Hashem asked the Jews if they want the Torah, Eretz Yara, the world was very scared. Okay, is it going to carry on existing, or is this going to be the end of all time? The Shakata, and then it got quiet, widely quiet, because the Yidden said, Nasa v'nishma, we accept the Torah. And then continues Pasuk Yud, V'kum le'mishpat, when Elokim, when Hashem gets up in judgment, Lahishia kol anvei Eretz Selah, to save all the humble people of the world forever. A hint to us that one of the biggest ways that we will deserve Mashiach is if we are humble. Hashem responds to humility, and we see this over and over and over again. Most famously, the time of Matan Torah, that Hashem wants us to be humble. Natural instinct is to become more and more arrogant, and Hashem says this is one of the things that we have to work on is humility, being humble. Interestingly, Chizkiyahu, who was one of the greatest, as we said, tzaddikim of all time, it says that he was very careful to remain exceptionally humble, and how he did it is that even though he was a king, he, in his own self and his own service of himself, he was really careful not to do things that would cause him to be arrogant. It says that in his daily diet, he ate only 2 bunches of greens and a little bit of meat, like just enough to live. And he should never even think of himself as being hugely wealthy, amazingly great, whatever. And then he says, Pasuk Yud Aleph, Ki chamas Adam teidecha, the way that men of violence, we through that we will thank you. She'eris chamas tachkor, and those who are left over from violence, Hashem, you will subdue them. And again, says the commentary that this is alluding to different acts of violence that people have done over the years. The most famously brought over here is that we saw people being thrown into furnaces. Most famous is Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, who were thrown into furnace and came out alive. And it says this is okay. They were violent people who would take another person and throw them into a fire. And when we saw how Hashem saved them, we turned to Hashem and we thanked him. We said, like, wow, okay, Hashem, you make miracles, even though there are crazy people in the world, even though there are violent people in the world, you, Hashem, have the ability to, and the ability, the desire, and to not to allow those wicked people to manage to do what they want to do. Nidru v'shalmai laHashem. Make promises and pay them to Hashem Elokechem, your God. Kol svivav yaviru shayla mayra. All of you who surround him, bring thanks to this awesome God. And this is a theme that David HaMelech uses over and over. Make promises. In other words, it's a good thing for us to make hachlatas, to make good resolutions and make promises of things that we're going to do better. But the trick is not just to make the promises, but vishalmai, to actually pay them. So it's always easy to say, I'm going to do this and this and this. It's always easy to promise huge amounts of money. It's always easy or easier, nidru, to make the promises. David HaMelech says the trick is nidru vishalmai, that you should make the promise and you should keep it. And then what happens, La Hashem, it will be to the God, the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey, the God of kindness, okay? And the promise that he ends with, he says, Yifta Ruach Negidim Meir Malcha Eretz. Hashem cuts down arrogant princes, that's Gog and Magog, that's Sanherib, that's in our own times, Hitler, Yamach Shemai, all these people who were arrogant and thought that they were the kings of the world and they could cut down whoever they wanted. But just remember, says Asaf, Yivtzei Ruach Negidim. Hashem cuts down the arrogance of these people, and that will be the announcement that Mashiach is here, that Gog and Magog have been overcome, and that we have the Mashiach, the Beis HaMikdash, and everything good again. So I think that's finishes today. Yeah.
Rivki, so we living here in out of Eretz Israel can never be complete. We can sit in sukkah and we can go to the mikveh, but we haven't got Eretz Israel, so we can't be complete.
So we can't be complete, but we can do as much completeness as we can. So we can be shalom in certain ways, but we don't have Eretz Israel here. That's true. And that here we're talking about like on a purely physical level. But real completeness is living in Eretz Yisrael, which is one of the reasons we daven for Mashiach, is that we should be living in Eretz Yisrael. Like,
and which shalom would that be here?
Sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
Which shalom would that be outside of Eretz Israel?
which line?
Which line, like you said, obviously as much as possible physically outside in order to be as complete as possible.
Right.
But
So in order to be complete, it says that, that these are the three things that a person can do to complete themselves. So we can go to mikveh, we can eat in a sukkah, right? Those are things that we're doing with our complete self, and other mitzvahs that we do refine us, make us more complete. But total complete is when we have a Beis HaMikdash and we live in Eretz Yisrael. That's total. That will be Vahi b'Shalom Sukkah. We will be complete when we have a Beis HaMikdash.
Okay. So it is general mitzvah. You never can complete that third point, but it is general mitzvah as much as possible outside.
Right.
Okay.
Right. That's what we do. I wish you all a ksiva v'chasima tova. It should be a good and a sweet and a healthy year for everybody. And we should see all these promises that David HaMelech tells us that Hashem is going to bring Mashiach in the Beis HaMikdash, and it should happen now and quickly and easily. So this year comes to a close, and I think probably we will only have a share again after Simchas Torah. I think so. Good Yom Tov.
Many thanks. Good job, Tov. Thank you.
Everybody. To you, and we will see you again. Thank you.